All right, that cover is off there, the starter drive cover. There is typically a starter that runs through here. We've obviously, somebody's already pulled these gears here that will run, and they're idler gears that work with the starters. So starter coming out here, idler gear here, and you can see back behind here, we've got another smaller gear that we'll get to in just a second here. All right, we've got a handful of bolts here that we're gonna have to remove here before this cover is pulled. 8mm bolt underneath of where that starter drive system would be. We've got our clutch release. That's that rod that I showed you that ran all the way through there. This actually would run into this area here. And there's a ball in here that runs that clutch release system there. All right, and we've got that cover, all the bolts off, ready to take this cover off here. There's a gasket in behind there. And keep in mind, this is your stator system, so it's a magnetic, so there is some magnetic pull here. So if it's a little difficult to come out, that might be your problem. The other problem is we've got a shift shaft down below here. And a lot of times those stick. All right, we've got this cover ready to come off here. Okay, cover is off there. There's your stator assembly there. So that's where your spark, where your energy comes from on your motorcycle there. We've got our flywheel here. We've got our idler gear, one of our idler gears here. I'm gonna tip this up so you guys are able to see a little bit better. All right, we'll go ahead and pull this stator, the shift shaft here. Again, like I said, this water pump. Got a boot covering our oil sensor. All right, we got our sub harness here that goes to our two sensors. Water pump here, four 10mm bolts. All right, your water pump cover is off there. If you can get in behind there, there's not a gasket. You can get into several different spots where you're not going to damage anything with a larger screwdriver there. What seals it is that O-ring there. So there's your water pump. It's off at this point. Our bevel gear there we'll work on next. A handful of 12mm bolts. All right, we're gonna pull this, and there is your output shaft there. So we can dig into that more if you guys request that. Let me know in the comments below. Being careful if you do that, there is a gear down here that stays in a spacer. So I don't want that sliding all over the place. The gear I think will stay there, but the spacer needs to be pulled out of there so we don't lose that. All right, we've got this Honda Shadow motor ready for the flywheel to be pulled, and we'll go ahead and split that case and get into that crankshaft and the transmission. So first thing you're gonna need is a 17mm with I would use an impact on here. It'd be very difficult to hold this flywheel from spinning as you're turning this. Second thing you need to know, this is reverse threaded. So you're gonna tighten this thing up the opposite that you normally would, you're going to loosen it up the opposite that you normally would. So go ahead and turn that clockwise, which is the right hand. Spin that bolt off of there. It's gonna be a specialty bolt, so make sure you go back in with the correct one. I like to use thread lock. Some people don't. This is actually torqued down quite a ways. You probably wouldn't need thread lock. And the nice thing is with it reverse threaded, the way the engine spins, it tightens it instead of loosens it. So that's just something to think about there. A lot of those that are spin the other direction aren't that way. They are going to loosen themselves. So you want to make very sure that those are Loctited. Next thing, you're going to need a flywheel puller, and I've got these in my store. Link is below, but you're going to want to use a flywheel puller specific for this model here. And then this particular one takes a 22 millimeter. And you'll spin that in, and I like to keep my hand on the flywheel itself just to keep it from turning. And then go ahead and just impact that in there. It doesn't take much. A lot of times these are held with a woodruff key, so they are not extremely tight. But there is your flywheel there. There's your one-way gear there. So inspect that, make sure it works well. How you inspect that, you set it down there. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pull this cap here. Grab a pair of side dikes. This is just held in. This is just pushed in. It's got an O-ring sealing that off. You can see there what we're catching on. We've got this shaft here that we're catching on. It's not allowing us to pull this flywheel gear off. What you're gonna have to do with this shaft here, and I kind of wiggled it out of the bushing down here, and then was able to get it up as far as that I could. Pulled that cap off there, so I made sure that I was going up as far as I could. And if you take these off together, they will pull out just fine. So there's no other way to get this flywheel gear off, or the starter gear here, with this shift shaft the way that it sits there. So setting that, the starter gear on top, on the back of this flywheel here, you can see that it'll spin one direction, won't spin the other. So you want to inspect that, make sure that stator is, or that flywheel is in good working condition, and that one-way gear is working.